right, let's hit 2021R 05. This is the latest ATF ruling. Final countdown. Countdown began on 4/26 when this was published to the Federal Register, and it goes into effect 8/24/22. There are a number of items very specific to all of you and how you conduct your business to be aware of. And we're going to be sending out a lot of information with this recording, so you can review that information word for word from the ATF. So some of the things we're going to cover: definition of a firearm, frame, receiver, and variants. Privately made firearms. There's been a lot of questions around the ghost guns and PFFs. Marking requirements as it relates to firearms in general, as well as marking requirements that are going to be required for privately made firearms. Record retention and record keeping requirements, some changes coming down the pipe as far as that's concerned. So let's get into definition of firearm, frame, and receiver. All right, so some of the definitions are changing. Essentially, it's just to provide some updated information and definitions as far as technological advancements and various developments that have occurred with regard to firearms manufacturing. There's been some significant technology upgrades and enhancements as far as the manufacturing process and how firearms are manufactured and such. So we want to get into that. Identifies a single part of each weapon as a frame or receiver. So, and we'll give you some examples so you can see exactly what they're talking about. Again, addresses that classification of partially complete, commonly referred to as 80%er frame receivers. And, you know, this is specific around those that are sold, distributed, or possessed with the associated templates, jigs, molds, equipment, tools, instructions, etc. And then it addresses partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frames or receivers as well that are sold and distributed within parts kits. So, all right. So number one example here, a frame or receiver parts kit containing a partially complete or disassembled billet or blank of a frame or receiver that is sold, distributed, or possessed, identified with, that's key here, with a compatible jig or template. As a person with any online instructions and common hand tools may readily complete or assemble the frame or receiver. And as you can see in this image right here, this is example number one, right? There's your jig and there's your blank, and the blank gets inserted to the jig, and it comes with the various drills that are needed, and everything's very specifically kind of pointed out. Here's where a hole goes. Here's where you got to cut out, etc. This is going to be defined as a frame and receiver. So if you have these kits in your stores for sale, just keep in mind, number one, sell them through August 24th. That's all well and good. But after August 24th, you're going to have to mark these blanks because they come with a kit. Hopefully everybody understands that's pretty straightforward. It also clarifies the rule and the definition of a firearm included in with a parts kit. And here you see a handgun that has all the parts and components, trigger mechanism, slide, and all of that. So if you have any of these kits as well, this is that kit for a handgun. Make sure that you get them sold through August 24th. After that date, if you're offering them for sale, then this is considered a frame and receiver. Definition of frame and receiver. This is not a receiver. If you're just selling the blank without a jig, without any of the tools or any other instructions or anything like that, if you are just selling this piece, this blank, then this would not be considered a frame or receiver and would not be required to be marked. PMF ghost guns. So this was a big one. Obviously, they're going to be incorporating into the Code of Federal Regulations privately made firearms and the rules around that. And then the rule amends the regulation to require all FFLs to identify, mark any PMF they take into their inventory. That means any PMF you have in your inventory or any PMF that you come into contact with, i.e. the person wants to sell it to you, for you pawnbrokers, the person that wants to pawn it, for you gunsmiths or FFLs that offer gunsmithing or armory processes. If they hand that firearm to you, that personally manufactured firearm to you, you will be required to mark that firearm. And this was the big question mark. How are we going to do this? Because typically with marking, you have to provide a bunch of different information, right? Manufacturer, city, state, and all those different things. The ATF has come down and actually provided some guidance on that. And what they're going to require you as the FFL to do is mark that firearm with your RDS key. That is the first 3 and last 5 of your FFL number, along with a hyphen and then a unique identification number. And you're going to have to keep track of those. So in other words, if you mark it with your RDS key, that's your first 3, last 5, dash or hyphen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you cannot use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. You will have to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, etc. So you need to make sure that you are keeping track of any serial numbers that you issue on personally manufactured firearms, so you ensure you do not duplicate them. There is an overview of this final rule as well as a training aid, and we will be sending that out to you along with the recording link for this webcast today. Additionally, there is some ATF virtual training being made available June 14th and 16th. This is open to the industry, so make sure you check that out. We will also be doing some additional training on this.
Yeah, JC, there's a lot of questions coming in. Folks, we will get to them. I think it's because of the amount of questions. Let's get through the material. Go ahead and type those questions in. We will go through them in order once we finish the presentation.
Yep. Next slide. So marking requirements, some changes coming as far as marking requirements. I have a feeling some of it may be actually welcomed by the industry. It puts manufacturers and importers, gives them some requirements around identifying firearms manufactured and imported by placement of serial number, name of licensee, and city, state of their place of business on the frame or receiver. We've seen this a lot with some of the firearms coming in, especially over the pandemic, where you're hunting and searching for the manufacturer and importer information. Sometimes it's beneath some handguards or underneath some shroud that they install on a shotgun, things like that. Just keep in mind that this ruling isn't gone into effect until August, so a lot of the firearms you're seeing right now probably aren't going to be impacted. It's for future firearms, so it just really defines the marking requirements around this and where it needs to be, so we're not having to hunt and search for the information. We still see a ton of firearms out there that don't have the appropriate markings, or they're hidden somewhere and we have to dig for them. So just keep that in mind. If you are a manufacturer of firearms, make sure you're paying attention to this ruling and doing as you are required to do. Again, this goes into effect August 24th, 2022.
Yeah. And this is going to actually kind of bring home the fact that we don't want the serial number everywhere and don't want multiple serial numbers, and kind of unifies where that serial number will be going forward. Right. Will it be on the slide, the frame, the barrel? I mean, it's going to be all in one place. And you will also probably get multiple serial numbers on guns with slides that replace them with other serial numbers, but the primary serial number will always be on the frame.
Absolutely. That has always been the case. So record keeping, here's a big change for you. You are going to be required come August 24th to maintain A&D records and that ATF form 4473 indefinitely. Basically, it's going to be until you either discontinue business or your licensed activity. So that means no more 20-year rule, right? Rules allow for paper records older than 20 years once this ruling goes into effect to be stored at a separate warehouse or electronically. Previously, you could seek a variance to store records off-site. That ended back in, I believe it was October of 2020. Now, what they're saying is they want at least 20 years kept on site. Anything older than 20 years can be stored separately or electronically. I don't see electronically being feasible, or I have definitely a number of concerns about that, but just keep in mind there will be an additional ruling coming out about storing the paper records older than 20 years, as well as that electronic record keeping process. So that one's coming soon. Just an interesting point I wanted to call out here, keeping records older than 20 years. You used to be able to just send them in, and actually up until August 24th, you can request to either send those records in, or you can actually destroy any records over 20 years. Obviously, the ATF would prefer you hold on to them or submit them to the out of office business center. But again, you're going to have to coordinate with them and your local field division in order to do so. Just the interesting point here is the average time to crime is 7.79 years. Firearms that are 20, 30, 40 years old are, I don't think are being used in too many crimes, but you never know. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, JC, let me just plug here the electronic versus paper firearms. We're seeing, again, JC said there's going to be a ruling on the electronic storage. 4473 is coming out hopefully within the next 6 months to ease up the variance requirements or variance submittals for that process. But we really do like and support the electronic record keeping out there. There's a ton of vendors available. There's a long list of them. There's some good ones, some bad ones, and some okay ones. And if you need more information on that later on, we'll probably have another session just on that. But start to consider and think about that as you see these vendors do presentations at the various firearms conventions and expos.
All right, today's rules, I just kind of went over them briefly. Licensees are required to maintain ATF Form 4473s for 20 years. That is the regulation. You can certainly, where the sale, delivery, or transfer of the firearm was not made, retain those for a period of not less than 5 years. That means anytime a NICS transaction number or appointed contact state control number was issued. All right, so if you get it denied, you have to keep it for 5 years. If you get a delay and that customer never comes back, but you had an NTN number or a state control number issued, you have to keep that one for 5 years. You have to keep record of that. So make sure you're doing so. After 5 years, you can go ahead and destroy them, and please do destroy them. It has a lot of personally identifiable information. For the 4473s where a firearm was transferred, the rule of thumb is, or the regulation requires you to maintain those for 20 years. After 20 years, you can either submit them to the out of office business center at the National Tracing Center, or you can go ahead and destroy those as well. Again, obviously the ATF would prefer that you turn them in. So your current ATF Form 4473 spells it out right there on page 3. So if you have old records, you really need to make a decision on what you're going to do with those. Please feel free to reach out to us and we can help you through that process.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients have been calling based on this upcoming ruling and go live date. So yeah, you can try to call your ATF office and see if you have those over 20 records transferred to the record center. We're not getting a lot of feedback on that. It's hit and miss, but you can try your local ATF IOI, start there and see if you get them picked up and shipped out.